Welcome, citizens of the world, but in particular, citizens of the United States. Because, as you know, today is Ratification Day, also known as the 239th anniversary of the ratification of the Treaty of Paris, where Britain relinquishes the control and the ownership of the 13 at the time existing states in the United States of America. Baby steps for the independence of that nation. It would take a few more years later until all of the states would unite as one, but this is where it all began at the end of the American Revolutionary War. So, for today, we are also having a ratification day for ourselves because we are compiling all of the news and changes and additions that are going to come in less than a couple of resets in 10 or so days with the release of patch 10.0.5. Talking about the new things coming, perhaps the more interesting one is, of course, the addition of the trading post. We have talked about this before, how this new system is going to change. This attempt from Blizzard to give some more things to do in the open world, completing some more activities of different kinds to earn tokens so that you can then redeem them for transmogs, for toys, for pets and mounts. Now, this is important to point out because even though the trading post will come live on the release of the patch 10.0.5, the actual trading post will open for business on the morning of February the 1st. So essentially 1 week after the patch. Now, the reasoning for this is likely because the trading post is on a 1 month rotation. So of course, you might as well just wait the first of the month to open the trading post. So you will have then the next rotation of rewards in the trading post pop up on the 1st of March, etc, etc. Now, the first month starting in February will be quite the simple one because you will be awarded 500 traders tender, so 500 currency for free, just for having purchased Dragonflight, and this will only be a one-time redeem of this prize just for having a copy of Dragonflight. The first month will be quite simple to get a whole bunch of rewards thanks to this extra bump in currency. What perhaps might interest players even more that is going to come with 10.0.5 is not just the trading post for cosmetic rewards, but is also, of course, the creation catalyst for gear, for character power. So, Creation Catalyst, renamed Inspiration Catalyst for this expansion, will become live in, at this point, 2 resets. What is changing about the Inspiration Catalyst is roughly nothing. If you are already used to the Catalyst from Shadowlands, then you will find it more or less exactly the same. You can change, you can turn pieces of gear awarded to you from the season into a different piece of gear. Now, the keyword here is season, so seasonal gear, which means from the season of Mythic Plus, from the season of PvP, and from the season of the raid. TLDR, no world quests, no reputation gear rewards, and no crafted gear. Those will not be able to be put into the Creation Catalyst to change them, to transform them into something else. Only gear awarded basically from the Vault. The Vault eligible gear from PvP, the Raid, and Mythic Plus is the type of gear that can be changed from the Catalyst into a tier set piece. What is also important, this was also something quite valuable from Shadowlands, is that not just the tier set pieces can be used through the Catalyst to change them. You can also change with the Catalyst. You can change cloaks, you can change bracers, you can change belts, and you can change boots into a different type of gear. Now, you might be asking, why? Why would I even want to change a piece of gear into something else if it doesn't turn into a tier piece? The reason why you might want to change, well, first, the simple reason, it's transmog. It will turn into something with the same looks from the raid. So if you wanted to complete the look, if you wanted to complete the transmog set from the raid, those slots will also help you. You will also need those 4 slots. But more importantly, it is because they change stats. They have fixed, predetermined stats in all these 4 species for all the classes in the game. So I will leave you behind the link with all of the transformed pieces for all the 13 classes to show you which stats they get. For example, you might be a Havoc Demon Hunter who really wants crit as the main stat and then some haste, but currently, unluckily, you have a belt with a whole bunch of verse and some mastery. Well, now you know that with the Creation Catalyst you can then turn it into something like this, with crit and haste, exactly what you want. So it will be quite beneficial to you eventually when you are done transforming your pieces into tier set pieces to also transform your belt into something with much better stats than what you have right now. Now, besides the Catalyst, there is also another event that will pop up in 10.0.5, which is going to be the Storm's Fury event. Now, this is quite confusing because while it looks kind of cool, you will start by having a quest from Valdrakken, which will send you into the Primalist's future, so the alternate dimension, and there is going to be a mini event where there are 4 portals in there. You have to defend the portals from wave of enemies. Eventually, once you are done defending all 4 portals in the zone, the mini-boss, the boss of the zone will spawn, you defeat the boss, and you get your currency. Now, as I said, the interesting thing is that out of this currency, which is going to be Essence of the Storm, the event itself will continue to drop the already existing currency for the Primal Storm invasions, so the Elemental Overflow, the Storm Sigils, that's going to be the same. The new currency, Essence of the Storm, can be used to acquire these type of rewards. Now, there are 4 pieces of gear at 385 item level, so the same type of item level you can already get from the Primal Invasion rewards, and also the actual, cosmetic alternative type of rewards is going to be 1 toy, 1 pet, and 1 mount of which also is quite horrible and ugly altogether. So it felt kind of interesting to have an entire edition of a new event tied to the Primal Invasions for such little reward, just a toy, a pet, and a mount for something quite cool, because of course this event will also be a sort of like a frozen frost cold storm, which will have a freezing mechanic in the actual zone, so you will be taking more and more ticking frost damage when you're out in the cold, and you will have to find shelter around campfires, around fire, to stop the freezing dot to kill you. Some of these items that you can get as rewards will also slow down the amount of ticking frost damage you take, or maybe remove stacks of the freezing debuff you are getting, to be able to stay in the frozen tempest, in the frozen storm for longer. So it's a cool little event. It's a bit weird that the amount of rewards from the event itself seem quite underwhelming at the moment. The event itself also is on a 4-hour timer, so it's gonna last for 4 hours and then take 6 hours to respawn, always in the same. There is going to be a weekly quest for a whole bunch of currency all at once, and then you can just repeat the event every basically 10 hours on a cyclical rotation. While I like the idea and the theme of the event, it looks somewhat bland, especially from a rewards perspective. Something that will likely also be enjoyed by many players in the PUG life. We are talking about tier sets, and we are talking about PUGs and rolling set tier sets. First of all, Blizzard is going to be fixing in patch 10.0.5 some situations where players could win need rolls on duplicate items in a single roll session when it should not have been possible. I'm sure you have all seen a whole bunch of screenshots of 2 or 3 different tier pieces dropping from the same boss and the same guy looting 2 of them, for example, which should not technically have been possible. Also, additionally, this patch will have updates in patch 10.0.5. For example, players can no longer roll need on any profession recipe that they have already learned, so that they can try to just sell it again, or players can no longer unconditionally roll need on one-handed weapons, or two-handed weapons for a warrior in Fury loot spec. The system will now thoroughly check if you can dual wield the weapon in question based on your loot spec. If you can, and you already have 2 versions of it at least as powerful as the items being rolled for, you can't need on the item. So they are trying to smoothen out the group loot situation, especially this one aimed mostly at LFR, difficulty in the raid. Now, what is also coming in patch 10.0.5, and we will also make a much larger video purely focusing all of the changes coming, is more balanced tuning. Of course, we have gotten at least 3 different instances of changes for the patch. Now, this is the last round of the tuning planned for 10.0.5. There are some more changes to Feral Druid already previewed before, and now they are getting ratified into the patch notes. Most of these are going to be buffs to Feral Druid, in particular the moving lunar inspiration at the bottom of the tree and increasing its damage by 66%, so making it a much more valuable and much more powerful end of the tree type of ability for you to start playing with Moonfire as a Feral Druid. Also, further buffs to the 2 choice node after your Nourish for Restoration Druid, making it even stronger than before. Again, as we said the first time we checked this, it will still be quite rare for Resto Druids to dump 3 points. 3 points just for this whole part of the tree, but now at least it's even stronger. There is a cool little change which can be simultaneously both a buff and a nerf to Preservation Evoker. Casting Echo directly after casting Living Flame or Spirit Bloom will no longer consume Echo. This was happening quite often because Living Flame and Spirit Bloom have a travel time and Echo is instant. You could cast Living Flame on your tank, immediately use Echo, and the Living Flame would also immediately consume the Echo you just casted. Sometimes it was annoying. It was annoying if you were planning on using, for example, other abilities to consume that Echo instead of Living Flame. Sometimes it was quite useful. You could have a tank at very low HP with Echo on him. You could cast Spirit Bloom. The initial cast of Spirit Bloom will consume Echo, and then while Spirit Bloom was traveling, you could apply another Echo, and the travel of Spirit Bloom would land on the tank, consume the second Echo for an overall massive single target heal. This is now being fixed, and there will be a 1 second grace period after you are casting either Living Flame or Spirit Bloom, which will no longer consume the freshly casted echoes on the targets. When it comes to Brewmaster, the change is much more simple, much more straightforward. The damage of Brewmaster is getting nerfed, while also spreading the damage more on their main core abilities and less on a boring passive general effect. We are talking about Resonant Fists. So the damage of Resonant Fists is being nerfed by 45%, which is a massive number if we look at the actual damage of this passive. And then pretty much all of the main core abilities of Brewmaster, from Keg Smash to Tiger Palm, Blackout Kick, Spinning Crane Kick, and Breath of Fire, are all getting buffed across the board. As I said, in an attempt to make all of the kit of Brewmaster do damage rather than this passive effect you take from the general tree of Monk. Small changes then to finish are going to Warrior. Battle Lord now increases the damage of Overpower by a little bit more, 35% instead of 25%, and more importantly for your defensiveness, Ignore Pain has been added to the Arms tree as a defensive ability for Arms Warrior. For Fury, the change is that the duration of Avatar and Recklessness caused by Berserker's Torment is now 8 seconds long, instead of 4 seconds long. This is all as far as the new additions to player power is concerned. We have a few more changes. One type of change is to creatures and NPCs, in particular rare enemies. Basically, the TLDR of all of this is that rare enemies are now going to show up much more often. Their cadence has been changed to spawn once every 30 minutes instead of once every hour. Also, things like new rare enemies and NPCs can now be found in elite areas of Nokudon Old, Imbu, Cobalt Assembly, Tyrol, and the Primal Future. So you have more rares to hunt now compared to before. And also, all of these new elite area rares are going to have the same loot rewards on par with the elite rares you were finding in the Obsidian Citadel. So, you know, that high item level scaling type of gear many players were hunting for before the release of the season. Now it's going to be much more widespread in all of these other zones, all of these other elite area zones with much higher item level rewards. There has also been a massive change to solo shuffle if you are into that. Many players have been complaining recently about the levers of solo shuffle ruining the whole thing. Players who leave excessively will be subject to account review and suspensions, as abandoning matches repeatedly is a violation of the terms of service via exploiting functionality to the detriment of the game environment and the intended player experience. TLDR, stop leaving games, you scrubs. We are finishing the whole list of changes coming to 10.0.5 with some cute profession changes. So, most items that previously required a profession other than engineering no longer have a requirement when it comes to transmog eligible pieces. Engineering items have had their skill requirements reduced to 1 for their appropriate expansion. Gnomish and Goblin engineering are no longer required to transmog any engineering appearances. Also, if you perhaps are thinking about making some money with this, legacy leatherworking patterns for heavy scorpion gear that were lost to the Cataclysm can once again drop from Blackrock Orcs in the Burning Steppes. Same goes for the legacy recipe for the delicious Goldthorn tea, can once again be acquired by observant adventurers in Razorfen Downs. So, in particular, the legacy leatherworking patterns right at the release of the patch, if you want to go down in the Burning Steppes to acquire them very early and then sell them back to some oblivious players, that is perhaps a good money-making venture at the release of 10.0.5. So, these were all of the changes that Blizzard added in the last couple of days for the release of patch 10.0.5. We will, as I said, eventually compile all of the balance tuning changes for the classes and specs as we wait a little bit more, letting Blizzard perhaps add a few more changes to the specs and classes. Perhaps they are not quite done yet. So we are waiting a little bit more until eventually we get our video compiling all of the 10.0.5 changes when it comes to balance tuning. But for today, this is where we are stopping. For this weekend, this Saturday, we are starting, of course, our goodbyes by thanking all of my Patreon supporters for contributing and supporting myself and this channel. You can support in other ways, not including the expenditure of money. Liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing, are fine enough ways to show your support. You can also follow me on Twitter if you ever want to get notified, for example, of whenever I go live on stream or whichever other type of news I want to give out to my viewers. That's a nice spot to keep track of it. And lastly, of course, I go live. Technically, I should be going live on Twitch streaming, generally from 10 p.m. Central European Time, 1 p.m. Pacific, and 4 p.m. Eastern US time zones. With this out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon. And in the meantime, man, it's getting better, but still. Sometimes I just get flashes of pain around here. So annoying.